People think marrying a billionaire is a fairy tale that ends with a diamond encrusted happily ever after. In reality, it is a crash course in losing your identity, your privacy, and your concept of what a dollar is actually worth. 5 years ago, I was a graphic designer earning $48,000 a year in a cramped studio apartment in Chicago. I lived on ramen, counted my pennies for the subway, and stressed about a $200 car repair. Today, I live in a 22,000 square foot estate with 12 bathrooms and a staff of 6. The transition wasn't gradual, it was a violent collision with a world I didn't know existed. The first thing that changes is the speed of your life. When you have access to a private aviation terminal, the world shrinks. You don't go to the airport 3 hours early to stand in a security line. You pull your SUV directly onto the tarmac, walk 10 feet, and you are in the air. I remember my first trip to the Maldives. We left London at noon. By 6 that evening, I was swimming in the Indian Ocean. It sounds glamorous, it is, but it also strips away the ritual of travel. The journey disappears. Everything is just a destination. Then there is the money. Not just having it, but the way it stops being real. When you see a price tag for $50,000, your brain usually stops. You consider the implications. After a year of living in this tax bracket, that number becomes a decimal point. You stop looking at the total at the bottom of a menu. You stop checking your bank balance before an impulse purchase, and that is dangerous. The silence is the next thing you notice. Billionaire homes are designed for privacy. They are often fortresses of stone, glass, and iron, tucked away behind miles of private roads or high walls. In my apartment in Chicago, I heard my neighbors, the sirens, the city life. Now the silence is so heavy it feels physical. My husband and I can sit in a living room as big as a tennis court and feel like we are miles apart. The dynamic of your relationships changes instantly. People you haven't spoken to since high school suddenly reach out to share a business idea. My own family shifted. They started walking on eggshells. They stopped asking me how I was and started asking me if I could help with their mortgages. It creates this permanent wall between you and the people who used to know the real you. You become a resource, not a human being. Security is not a luxury, it is a cage. We have 3 full-time security guards on rotation. They know when I wake up, when I leave the house, and where I go. My location is tracked. My social media is vetted. You lose the ability to have a bad day in public. If you are angry, crying, or just disheveled at a grocery store, you are a headline. So you learn to wear a mask. You become a performer in your own life. The biggest misconception is that money solves your internal problems. It doesn't. If you were insecure before, you are now insecure in a Versace gown. If you were anxious, you are now anxious about losing it all. I spent my first 2 years married trying to keep up. I bought the designer bags, the custom jewelry, the high fashion couture. I thought it would make me feel like I belonged in his world. It didn't. It just made me feel like an imposter who was really good at shopping. We have a prenup, obviously. It is 84 pages long and covers everything from the distribution of assets to the non-disclosure agreements regarding our private staff. It was the most unromantic conversation of my life. It was a reminder that this marriage is a contract as much as a union. The lifestyle creep is subtle. You start with private jets, then you need a private chef because the food at high-end restaurants isn't fresh enough. Then you need a house manager because the staff isn't organizing your life efficiently. You start living in a bubble that is pressurized to prevent reality from seeping in. I eventually stopped trying to fit into his world and started dragging parts of mine into it. I started a small foundation for urban arts education. It wasn't about the money. The money was easy. It was about the work. I needed to do something that didn't have a price tag. I needed to feel like a person who produced value rather than someone who just consumed it. If you are wondering if I am happy, the answer is complicated. I am safe, I am comfortable, I have experienced things that 99% of the population will only see in movies, but I have also traded a piece of my autonomy. I live in a gilded room where every door is unlocked, but there is nowhere else I am allowed to go. Would I go back to the 48,000 a year? Sometimes, when the silence in the house becomes too loud, I think about the tiny apartment in Chicago. I think about the ramen, the struggle, and the feeling that everything I had was something I had actually earned. The money doesn't make you different. It just makes everything you already are much, much louder. It amplifies your flaws, it highlights your loneliness, and it makes you realize that the most expensive things in the world aren't the ones you can buy in a store. They are the things you lose while you are busy acquiring everything else. Ask yourself this before you envy the view from the top. Are you looking for the life you want, or are you just running away from the struggle you currently have? Because the struggle doesn't end when the bank account hits 10 digits, it just changes shape. And sometimes the new shape is much harder to carry.